Welcome back, everyone. Now let's go ahead and get started. You can see that I've already created a pretty basic SwiftUI application. It has currently no integration with CloudKit. This is all the code that you see on the screen is by default. So the first thing we need to do is to add the CloudKit framework to our application. I'll click on the task tracker application, and you will find signing and capabilities. Let's click on that. One of the capabilities that we want to add is for the CloudKit. So let's go ahead and select adding a capability, the plus button. And now you can actually search for CloudKit. So let's go ahead and type in CloudKit or iCloud. You can see the iCloud coming up. Double click on it. And what it will do is that it's going to add an entitlements file for you. So make sure that you are part of some sort of a team, as you can see right here. And now I'm actually going to use CloudKit. Now there are a couple of different services that the CloudKit provides that you can use. I'm just going to check on the CloudKit and the key value storage. Great. iCloud documents, I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to use CloudKit and key value storage, so you don't really need to click or check mark on that. Okay. Now the other thing which is very important here are the containers. And container, basically, as we covered before, containers kind of represent that where your data will be contained, will be stored. And for our iCloud application, one application will come with one default container. But we have to create the container. You can see over here, there is a container already present. I can select that, but it's always a good idea to create a container which is for the particular app that you're building. So I can use this plus key and add the name of the container. That container name should be unique. So I can say com.azamsharp. And then something over here. That will be the name of my application. So I'm just going to call it task tracker. Okay, let's go ahead and click OK. And you can see that it's still updating. And now we have this container built, which is called the task tracker. Another thing that you will, even though it is in red color, it should be okay. Another thing you will notice is this CloudKit console link or a button. And what this does is that it takes you to the iCloud console where you can see all your containers. And not only that, you can see your data. So let's go ahead and click on that. Make sure that you are signed in. So that's the most important part. You must be signed in to your iCloud. All right. So it will ask you to sign in. So make sure you sign in. And then you can click on our CloudKit database. And right over here, you can see some of my existing containers. Now, this is not the container that we created. So let's go ahead and click on that. And we can see our own container, which is a task tracker. Let's click on that one. And now we are looking at the task tracker container. You can see that it's currently telling us error loading container details, not a big deal. Let's go ahead and refresh it. Sometime you will see these kind of errors when it is taking time to create the container. The best thing you can do is to kind of like sign out and sign back again. And that sometimes helps. All right, so I'm just going to sign out. And now I can try to sign back in again. Obviously, you should use your own password. Okay, so I'm signed in. Sometimes it does take a little bit of while to set up the container. You can still see error loading the container details. I think it's going to take a little bit more time to do all of that stuff. Let's go ahead and switch the container. Okay, so this one looks like it's working, but this one is actually still, maybe it's not set up correctly right now. It's still in that particular case. Not a big deal. Hopefully it will resolve automatically. So I'm just showing you that you will get these kind of weird errors, and it will hopefully set up correctly. Let's go ahead and see what's going on in Xcode. You can still see it's like red. Okay, so I press the refresh button, and now you can see it's a little bit in a different color. Let's see if that helps over here. Nope, still doesn't like it. You can see it's like different color. It's still telling us that it's loading problems. I think it might just take a little bit of while to create that container. All right. Okay, nope. All right, let's go ahead and sign out again. And you will get to these issues. So that is why I'm showing you. Hopefully it's not a big deal. I'm just going to sign back again and see if it resolves the issue or not. But these kind of problems, hopefully they will go away on their own. There we go. See, I didn't really do anything, right? You can see now the error is no longer appearing. So the things that we learned is that sometimes you will have to sign out, sign back in again. And if you want to see your container not giving that error, or just click this refresh button. And sometimes it just takes a while, okay? So make sure you do that. And this button, CloudKit console, we have already seen that it simply launches a Safari browser and it takes you to the console. You must be signed into your iCloud, so make sure you have those credentials so that you can sign in. And that's pretty much it. That is how we will set up the CloudKit framework. We created the entitlement file, and we added the capabilities, which you can see right here. And now we are good to go and start using our application, start creating our application. So let's go ahead and do that in the next lecture. Okay, so now since we have added the CloudKit framework, we have added the entitlements, and that is added to our capabilities, the next step would be to create a model that's going to represent what we will be saving in our iCloud database. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and create a new group. I will call it models. And since we want to store a task, I'm just going to add a Swift file, and I will call it task item. That will be the item we will be storing in the database. Great. So what will this task item look like? Well, it will have a struct. It will be a struct of task item. And it will have a couple of different things. We will have a record ID. Now, record ID is related to the actual ID of the element that we will be storing in the iCloud. So in order to add the record ID, we will have to also import CloudKit. You can think of a record ID as a unique key about a particular task. And this will be automatically be created by CloudKit when this particular task or any task is going to be stored in the CloudKit database. What other things we want to store in our CloudKit database? Well, we want to store the name of the task. I mean, you can call it title if you want. The title of the task is fine also. So let's go ahead and name it title. Like mow the lawn, feed the dog, things like that. We will also store date assigned. So date assigned will be date. So let's go ahead and put date. And we will also have is completed, meaning if the task is completed or not. And I will make it initial value to be false. And it's a var, so this means that we can set it up later on. We can change the value later on if we want to. Okay. Now, this is great. We have the task item. One thing you will learn is that when you have this task item, when you save it in the CloudKit, you can't really just insert the task item, which is your own structure or your own model. You have to create a CK record to insert it. So what we can do is we can create a CK record. So I'm going to extend my task item, and I'm going to go ahead and add a property called CK record. So this means that this particular CK record, which is a property of task item, is going to return you the record which will be based on the task item. All right. So let's go ahead and say record, CK record. And the record type that we are going to be creating will be the task item. Now, I can go ahead and put task item as a string over here, but it's not a good idea to put string because if something changes, I have to change it everywhere. So we will go ahead and remove that eventually, and you will see that we will replace it with something else. So this CK record type basically means that when you save a document, this particular item in the CloudKit iCloud database, the record it will show will be the task item. So this will be the custom record that you will see. Let's go ahead and set up also different properties of our record. The title will be equals to title. Again, I'm using a string over here, and we will see in a moment that how we can replace that and to use an actual keys. Record, which is date assigned, and the value will be date assigned. And for record is completed, and the value will be is completed. And then we will simply go ahead and return the record. Now, going back to the question that we have been using these strings everywhere, not a good idea. Let's go ahead and change that and use some sort of enum and keys. So enum task record keys, which will be string. And I can go ahead and create a type, which is a task item, name, which is a title, and date assigned. So I'm creating all these keys instead of using those string values. So now I can go over here and I can say task record keys dot type dot raw value. Great. And the same thing I can do over here also. Okay, I can go ahead and say task record keys dot, what is it? Title. So title dot raw value. And for the data sign, I can also do the same thing. So all of these keys, we can simply change that to something else. Data signed. And over here, we can call it is completed. A little bit better, right? You can also, if you want, you can create enum with a property title or a value or something, so you don't have to say raw value, I guess. But that's fine. I guess for now, it works for our cases. Okay, so now we have created the task item. We have created the task record keys. We also have a record property inside our task item, which is going to return you a implementation of record, which is based on the task item. Okay, so that's all good. And now we are ready to save a particular task in our iCloud database. All right, so now let's go ahead and see that how we can insert our task into the iCloud database. For this to happen, we have to create some sort of a screen that will allow us to enter a particular task. So I'm just going to go over here into my app and I'm going to create screens. Inside the screens folder, I'm going to add another SwiftUI view, and you can call this anything you want. I'm just going to call this to-do list screen. Okay, there we go. And this will be our main view that will be handling everything. So I'll go to my task tracker app, and instead of the content view, I'll simply use to-do list screen. We will not really be using content view, so if you want, you can go ahead and delete it. Let's go ahead and delete it. Okay, that should be fine. Okay, so this is our to-do list screen, and this will be displaying all the information that we need to add a particular item. The first thing I'm going to add will be a state variable that is going to capture the actual item, meaning the name of the item. Or you can call it title, because that's what we're calling it, right? Title. Okay. We need a text field. So let's go ahead and add a VStack. And I'm just going to go ahead and add a really simple text field, which is going to use the task title. You can see the text field is being displayed. We can add a spacer to push the text field on the top, and also add a bit of a padding for our VStack. Great. Now, instead of adding a button for adding a title, I can go ahead and hook up the onSubmit event handler on the text field. So whenever you press the return key in the keyboard, then it will be submitted. Once you click on Submit, it is at this time that we are going to go ahead and create a task item. So we can use the task item, and a couple of different things we need to provide over here. The title, which will be the task title, and the date assigned. Well, the date assigned over here will be the current date. We are also not really doing any validation. So add validation. That's a to-do. We need to add that also. Okay. And after this, we need to add this task item that we just added into our iCloud database. For this, I'm going to go ahead and create another file over here, and I will simply call this a model. Okay, so what is this model? How is it different from the task item? Well, this model is kind of like our point in contact that will allow us to communicate with the CloudKit. Okay, so in our application, which is a pretty small application, I'm just calling it a model. So this will be the actual aggregate model where you will perform the addition, filtering, deletion, updating, all the stuff. So your actual view or your processing will be done something like this. So it's going to go right there, view, it's going to go to the model, and then the model is going to use the CloudKit database or the CloudKit framework and persist all this information. So the view is only going to be talking to the model, and that is the model that we are creating right now. And I have defined it and this particular type of approach in my course, which is MV design pattern. It's actually much simpler design pattern, so I would recommend that you check it out also. I'm going to go ahead and add CloudKit, and now I can go ahead and say model, which will be an observable object. And I'm going to go ahead and decorate it with main actor because we will eventually have a published property over here, and that published property is going to dictate that whenever we set that property, whenever that property changes, it will refresh the user interface. Right now we don't have that. That's not a big deal. We will eventually have it. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create a DB property, which we will use ckcontainer.default.private database. You can see that we have a private cloud database or a public database. The private database is only for the user that is currently logged in. So whatever you put in the private cloud database is only for you. The public database, whatever you put in the public database, it is accessible to everyone. Now, I don't really want my task item to be accessible to everyone. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a private database. Okay. So the next task is to add a particular task. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a function called add task. In order to add a task, you will pass in the task item. It's going to be an async function because we are going to take help from one of the async functions provided on the DB over here, which is save. And you can see it's kind of simple. You just call the save function. But keep in mind that I can't really simply pass in the task item to the save function because it takes in a record. So if I try to do this, which is really tempting, it's not really going to work. And let's call this task item instead of task. So that's not really going to work. We need to make sure that we are passing a record. And the good thing is that our task item structure that we build does contain a property which we created, a record, which is going to be returning you the representation of the task item in terms of the record, in terms of the CK record, which we can actually insert into the database. Let's go ahead and get that. So I'm just going to go ahead and say try await. And that is pretty much it. It's going to save the actual record. And whenever it saves the record, it's going to give you that record that it has saved and you can do something about it. Okay, right now we're not really doing anything about this, so that's fine. All right, so now we can go ahead and try to call this particular add task function from our to-do list screen, because that is where we are using it. At this point, we can create a state object. You will see later on that we might need to use an environment object, depends on our scenario. But right now, I'm just going to use the state object. Okay, so this is the task that we want to insert. I can go ahead and call model.addTask. You can see that it's faded out. And the reason it is faded out, it's not allowing me to select this, is because we are not in asynchronous context. So let's go ahead and pass in the task. We should actually call it task item, just to be consistent. Let's go ahead and add task item. And we're currently not inside async context, so I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this around with the actual task closure. And now we are inside the context, and I can call task, or I can call the add task function. Okay. The record we are getting, we didn't really do anything, so for now we can just use underscore. We will be using something. We will be using it later, but right now we're not. Let's go ahead and build it. Okay, great. And I think now it's time to run it to see that if everything works as expected or not. Now, in order to run it, I'm just going to go ahead and run the application and in the actual simulator. And the reason I'm running it in the simulator and not the Xcode preview is because I will need to make sure that I'm signed in iCloud. If I'm not signed in iCloud, I won't be able to use the app. Okay, so that's a very important part that you have to do. You have to make sure that you are signed in. So let's first go ahead and see that if the application is at least running and showing us the screen that we are looking for. There we go. And just to make sure that I am signed in, I'm just going to go back to the settings and see if I am signed in or not. You can do that in your simulator. You can see right over here, you see my name and everything, but it's actually also telling me that, hey, you better sign in. So, okay, that is a good indicator that I should probably go ahead and sign in. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab my Apple password and all that stuff and see if we can actually sign in. Let's go over here. Okay, looks like I'm signed in, hopefully. And now I'll go back to my app and try to see if we can insert something. So I'm just going to go ahead and say clean dishes and press enter. Okay. And pressing enter is kind of like when you press a return key in the keyboard. Obviously, the keyboard doesn't really pop out. We can make it pop out, I guess. We can go to the keyboard and toggle keyboard. Let's see if it actually pops out. Sometimes it pops out, sometimes it doesn't. You can see it's giving us some sort of an error. There we go. And I will say mow the lawn. Again, it kind of pops back in. This might be a bug or something. You can run it on a real device if you want to. Okay, so I added a couple of different tasks. And I'm back on the CloudKit console. And now I want to see that if I was able to save those tasks or not. Let's first make sure that we're selecting the private database, and the task, the record type we're looking for is the task item. And if you press on query records, you will see that it will give you an error saying the record name is not marked queryable, meaning that we still need to do something to make sure that we can see the results. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. Well, clicking on the indexes, now click on the task item. You can see all these indexes that are already available. We can add another basic index on the record name. Queryable is fine, and then save changes. So you have to do that if you want to look at the records in your database. So I'm going to say private and task item, and hopefully we will see something. Okay, there we go, clean dishes. At least one of our tasks went through. Maybe I just added one and not the other one, but you can definitely see today's date, and you can see that the task is added to the database. So that looks good. looks like we are able to add a task to the iCloud using CloudKit. We still need to display the task, delete the task, and also update the task. We can click on the task, and you can see different properties of the task, which one of them is date assigned, is completed, meaning is false, it's marked with 0, and the title of the task. You can also see something other interesting parts about the task, like this particular ID of the task. That will be your record ID. That is a unique identifier of the task. It's automatically generated, so you don't have to worry about it. Great. So we have one task added to our iCloud storage. Next up, we'll see how we can display the task. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how we can display the tasks that are already stored in our iCloud database. So we have to fetch the task and display it. Once again, I'm going to go back to my model. And in our application, since it's quite small application, I don't really need to create other aggregate models. I actually like to call this aggregate model. So I'm just going to type it over here, somewhere, I guess, over here, aggregate model. So if I was using task item and maybe I have notes and I'm fetching notes, I would use the same aggregate model. So I would not create a different view model to perform all these different things. I will just use my aggregate model. Okay, so now we need to fetch all the tasks or populate all the tasks. So let's go ahead and create a function called populate task, which will be an async throws. That's fine. Now the question is, well, how do we fetch all the tasks? In order to fetch the tasks, we are going to create a query, CK query, and we can pass in the record type, which will indicate that what kind of a record that we are fetching. And I can say task record keys dot type dot raw value. And the predicate, well, since I want to fetch everything, I'm just going to go ahead and pass in true for the predicate. Next up, I'm going to select the sort descriptors. Sort descriptors are going to allow us to sort the items in a particular manner. So I'm just going to use a sort descriptor for a particular key, which is date assigned, and ascending will be false. So I want all the tasks in descending order, not ascending order. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and get the results. We will get the result by calling db.records. And over here, when we call the records, we can perform matching. And we can pass in the query itself. So whatever the query is saying, it's going to fetch all those records. Or give me the result, basically. Okay, so what will be our next step? Well, the next step was to get the actual matching records. So match results.compact map. And you'll see that it kind of returns you in a very weird way, like a tuple, which you can see right there. So we are only interested in the actual record. So we can go ahead and run a compact map, which is basically saying that don't give us the null values, just ignore those. And we are going to select the first item of the tuple and call get method on it. So we can get that particular item. This is going to be the records. Now the question is, where should we put these records? For that, I can go ahead and create an array and put all the things in an array. But instead of creating an array, I'm going to create a task dictionary. And you will find out later that why we're doing that. You don't really have to create a task dictionary if you don't want to, but you will actually find out why we're doing that. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and create a dictionary. And you can see it's a very specific kind of a dictionary where the key of the dictionary is the record ID and the value it will store will be the task item. So now what we want to do is once we get the records, we will go through all the records. And I know you're wondering that why did we use a dictionary and why not use an array? And I will show you later on why we did that. Task dictionary, record.record ID, and passing in the task item. So we'll create a task item, But now, how do we create the task item? I mean, in order to create the task item, we need to provide a title and date assigned. But in this case, we want to create a task item based on the record. So this means that we have to go back to the task item and update it so that we can construct the task item based on the CK record that we're passing. So let's go ahead and create task item, init, record. So we're creating an initializer, a custom initializer for our task item. And we're simply saying that, okay, if I pass in a record, give me the task item. So let's go ahead and implement our initializer for the task item. I'm going to go ahead and begin with title equals to record. And once again, we can use title over here, but since we already have the task keys that we implemented, why not use that? Task keys.title.raw value. All right. And we're going to get the string because the title is a string. And the same technique we will apply to get the date assigned as well as is completed. So let me just go ahead and copy it because it's the same exact code. We'll just make a little bit of arrangements over here. And instead of hard coding the title, we will use task record keys dot, and I think it's the date assigned dot raw value. And for the is completed also, we're going to use task record keys dot date assigned, and then it will be is completed. Oh, not date assigned, sorry. Should be is completed raw value. Okay. So once we have all of this stuff, we can go ahead and call the initializer. And in this case, we can get the record ID, which will be record.record ID, and the title. So in this case, the title will be just the title. Date assigned will be date assigned, and is completed will be is completed. All right. There we go. And just to keep in mind that this particular record refers to the record that we passed in over here, although we do have another property called record. So hopefully it's not going to get confused with which property are we referring to. Since this is a local variable, this should get precedence, and we're going to be accessing the record instead of computing it all over again. Okay. Okay, now let's go back to our model. And in the model, we will take a look at it. Looks fine now because now our task item does take in a record and construct a task item using the CK record and then putting it in a dictionary. I'm sure that you're wondering why we are using a dictionary. We'll get back to that later. Okay. Now the final thing we need to do is we need to expose some sort of a property that will allow us to look at all the tasks. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a property called task. And this is going to take the dictionary because the dictionary has all the items, take the values, and then simply return the first item of there. All right. So whatever is in the values, we're just going to return those. So it will be a read-only task item array that will be returned to the view. Now let's go to the view. And we would like to see that if we can display all of our items. So where should we display the item? That's kind of up to you. Let's go ahead and add a list over here. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and call model.task. So this is going to give us all the tasks. ID. Well, we'll have to see if the task is conforming to identifiable. Probably it's not. So that's another thing we have to do. We have to make sure that the task, either it is identifiable that you can use, or you're just making sure that you put a right key over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the right key, which in our case will be record ID. That's fine too. Task item in and task item dot title. Okay. We still need to fire all of this stuff. So this is up to you. Where do you want to add the actual call to that? I'm just going to go ahead and add a task modifier right here. And I will perform model.populate task. But model.populate task needs to be called with try await because it can throw an exception, and we have to wrap it in a do catch. So let's wrap it around with do catch. And for now, we're just going to go ahead and print out the error on the console, but eventually we'll fix that too. And that is, I think, pretty much it. Let's go ahead and run our application. And there we go. We got clean dishes. Perfect. Right? So it looks like it's working perfectly good. Another thing that we need to check is what happens if I go ahead and add a particular item. Currently, you can see that when we add an item, it does go and add it into the iCloud database. That's perfectly fine. But what it doesn't do is it does not add it to our collection, to our dictionary. So even though the CloudKit database, iCloud database will be updated, but we will never get to see that item on our screen. So one way to do that is to, first of all, get the item, task equals to task item. We will get the record, because that is what's going to be returned. So task item, we can pass in the record. So we will create a particular task item, and we will just put it in the dictionary. So this is going to make sure that our task is synced with the UI. Over here, I can say pass in the record ID. Now, record ID in this case is nullable, so I can't simply use that. I have to unwrap it. Now, you might be saying that, hold on a second, why are you force unwrapping it? There's not a big deal if you force unwrap it over here, because the record is saved, and when you save a record, it already has the record ID. So it's not going to be possible for this code to break because it is called after you have saved. And this particular record will always have the record ID. That's what the CloudKit actually does. It assigns the record ID to you. Let's go ahead and add a task. I'm going to say feed rabbit. And there we go. Our task is actually added. So now our database is synced with the UI. Whenever we add a task, not only we add a task to the CloudKit database or iCloud database, we also make sure that it is added to our dictionary. Once again, we are going to go into more detail as why we are using a dictionary or not. Let's go ahead and query our records. We should be able to see feed the rabbit right there, second one. So this means that we are able to insert items to our iCloud database. Great, right? Now, in the next video, we want to see that how we can perform updating, filtering, deleting, all of these different tasks that we want to do. We're going to check it out in the next section.